Hello and welcome to a much overdue Connecting Consciousness podcast. We're going to go on obviously to the hot topic, China. And I know that those of you who have been very kind and have listened to me, for some of you for many years, know that I don't do fear. You don't sort of grab 5 or 6 pieces of information and then suddenly rush to the microphone and then 10 minutes later regret what I've said. I've always been very careful, and I receive information from one source. I don't go public unless I receive identical or similar information from a separate, non-connected source. So there's a lot of people on the internet who get information which, in my opinion, sometimes ranges on the lunatic, the crazy, and they go out with it as if it's like the God's honest gospel. But it's come from a source, and when you trace that source back, it's just somebody sitting in some room somewhere just doing stuff. So we don't fall down that road, and it's a balance between alerting people, giving people the heads up, but not false information, not stuff that's just designed to make panic and fear. So I'm going to give you what I have received and what I have double checked, and if it's not as exciting or as glorious as you would like, well, there are plenty of other websites that can frighten you to death. I don't want to do that, but I do want you to be aware of what I know so that you can take reasonable precautions. So here we go. It won't be in any order, I'm afraid. There's a lot of talk on the internet that the coronavirus is just not existent, and it's all about 5G. That basically it's 5G killing everyone off in China. That's not what I believe. It's not what I've heard. Okay. I also don't believe that it's a cover for 5G to kill people. Now, what I was told, and I've already made this public, was that when the coronavirus hit and it became fairly obvious that it was an incredibly serious virus, there were a large number of people who are pro 5G, and it's true that Wuhan has got a large number of emitters, phased array antenna for 5G. They said, we've got nothing to lose, we'll bathe the population in 5G because it might make the cells mutate, or it might make the virus mutate, it might make the transmission from one person to another different. So they did up the 5G. Now there are a lot of people who have got the information that 5G was turned on in that area and it was at full power, and they've run with that, and they've jumped to the next conclusion, which was that's what's killing people. No, that's not what I'm hearing. That 5G is being used simply because the authorities don't know what to do. So there may well be a number of people embedded within the Chinese government who are very pro 5G, who are then using that as a very good experiment to see what effect it has on people. So I'm not saying that it's all benign. I'm saying that there must be a number of people who it plays very nicely into their hands, but that's not how it originally started. There's also talk about this is designed to kill off the world population. All the doom and gloom mongers are back out now saying 3/4 of the population are going to be wiped out and this is that. No, that's not the case. And there are people that say the Chinese government are doing it themselves. No, that's not the case. China has a plan to dominate the world economically. That is their plan, not through tanks or missiles, but through the power of the yuan, through the power of their money. To wipe out a huge proportion of their population and all of the industry that goes with it does not match the plan. Even the elite people, the top 0.1% who do want population reduction, would not do it to their own people. in China, because it would totally undermine and destroy China as an economy, which is what's happening. So that's not the case. Okay, I know it's very popular and people are running away with the story. No, this is what I understand to be the case. We have to be careful because we don't want to be cut off the air and, you know, made sure that we can never broadcast again. In the early 1990s, bioweapons became a viable option because the first bioweapons were so blanketing that they would just wipe everybody out. And it took a long time in laboratories to begin to make what I call intelligent viruses. In other words, viruses that would target certain communities. Now, the AIDS virus is an interesting one. Those of you who've done the research, you know that that wasn't a natural phenomenon. That was created in a laboratory. The computer projections for China were that within the next 25 years, it would dominate the world. Now, you could say already that China dominates, and it does in terms of industry. You know, between 75 and 85% of the world's shoes and boots are made in China. Vast numbers of other products solely made in China. But in the next 20-25 years, it was projected that China would be in such a position that it would be able to threaten governments in the West. And so an elite that is not part of the government but is a separate, you know, people call shadow government or the deep state, all of these terms, decided that they were going to take out China as an economic powerhouse. Remember that Japan was a net exporter of products until Fukushima. Now Japan is a net importer. So Japan as an economic power was destroyed. Now it was China's turn, but there were no nuclear reactors to have a go at, no buildings near the sea. So the best way they looked at it was to create a panic. Now, there is evidence that in some, again I have to be very careful, American diplomatic missions in China that have been evacuated, the Chinese, being very suspicious of course with good reason, did go in and do a search and appear to have found some things which have made the dragon societies, that's the red dragons and the white dragons, very angry, not with the American government, let me make that very, very clear, not with the American government, but with an aspect that's embedded within the American power system, which appeared to link biological warfare. It is possible to release this virus into one of the many marketplaces in Wuhan where there are animals. The Chinese are very much into keeping birds and animals. It's part of what they do for food. And I believe that these vials were opened and these animals were infected to a certain extent, avians, and also all the people in the marketplace. So there was a blanket movement. This is carried by the air. Just like a seed might be blown in the air for 50 yards. So this virus can be airborne. Most viruses don't travel like that. This one can. That's how I believe it was spread. So it is a biological weapon as far as I'm concerned, and there cannot be many doctors, medical doctors, who will accept this virus as just normal. I would think any doctor worth his or her salt would have some serious concerns how this virus can be so resistant. Because when nature creates something, it creates strengths and weaknesses, but when you create something in a laboratory, you aim to remove the weaknesses and build the strength. So it's like a super soldier, it's like a super virus, and that's exactly what we've got here. Are the Chinese lying about the numbers infected and dead? Yes, but I need to be a bit more careful on that. The Chinese are only reporting a confirmed case when they've done a a CT or a CAT scan of the patient's lungs and other medical information from the body. And when they put that together, if both show up as positive, they will then say that patient has coronavirus. Now, a few days ago they were reporting that 66,000 infected in China with about 2,500 dead. What I'm being told is that somewhere between 250,000 people and 500,000 people in China have the virus. Now, I'm looking at the lower end, about 250,000, but certainly it could be 350,000. The death rate is far lower simply because they are only counting the dead that they are dealing with, and they have a history for. So if somebody dies on the street or somebody dies in the house and then they're reported and the body's collected, they won't show that as a death from coronavirus. They'll show that as a death from something else. And so we're probably looking, instead of the 2,600 dead, I am being told we're probably looking at between 10,000 and 12,000 dead. Chinese do not wish to tell the truth because they believe, quite wrongly, that people will judge them adversely. And so they've done what we would call accounting moves. They've changed the way that they record, they've changed the information. So the people at the very top have a very clear idea. Look, the city of Wuhan is like London. It has 8 million people. That's a lot of people. Now, if you take the official figures that the Chinese are giving of a city of 8 million, they're saying that 66,000 have the virus and 2,500 have died from it. These figures are a bit old, but that's the last figures I looked at. Well, in a city of 8 million, a figure of 2,500 dead over 6 to 8 weeks is not huge. And yet they've completely sealed the whole city off. They've put earth banks, concrete, logs. They had earth movers to completely block off all roads in and out. They built 2 military-style field hospitals in 10 days. They've had more crematoria built to burn the bodies. They don't want to bury them because of the virus, and they want to burn them. The only way in and out is through trains or airplanes, and the military are doing all that. So we have to say to ourselves, why would you go to the trouble of closing all your schools, closing all your theatres, your cinemas, all the socials? Don't even allow people to play mahjong in a group anymore now. Why would you do all that if you only had 2,500 extra deaths? Why would you move 250,000 doctors and nurses from all over China into that area? Why are there 500 plus doctors, nurses and medical staff infected with this virus? Medical staff who should be protecting themselves and know the truth. So the answer to all of those questions is simply this: far more people have been infected, the death rate is far higher, and the resistance and the capability of the virus is greater than was first understood. So in other words, the medical staff in the early days treated it as a normal virus. And when they realized that it wasn't, they changed the way that they work with it. This virus can live for about 28 days on a hard, dry surface. It can potentially travel in water and live. So we're dealing with something that's far hardier, far more resilient than anything else nature can produce, which tells us it is a bioweapon. This virus is prone to sunlight, so sunlight destroys it. That's interesting. So as the summer approaches, we should see a great reduction. Also, ultraviolet light, I'm being told, has a very beneficial effect. As this virus hits to other communities, as it is doing, if it does hit as a true pandemic, then you really must wear a mask. You must get some food in, and you must be prepared for, in whichever country you're in, for the schools to be shut, for entertainment to be shut, you know, clubs, nightclubs, bars, cinemas, and a total lockdown. The whole point of this virus was not to kill off people. That's a concept. I understand why people think that, but that's not the concept. It is to destroy China's economy. It is to spread fear and panic, to prevent the Western world wishing to engage with China, and to put China into lockdown. That's exactly what it's achieved. So with the economy in China in serious trouble, its powerhouse undermined, its political power is reduced dramatically. Now, I'm in no doubt that China was targeted because of the projections that showed where it would be in the near future. The virus is much more vicious, if I can use that word, than is being let on. And I don't for 1 minute think that the governments of the world are blind to this. They know. Governments would rather hide the truth than create what they see as uncontrolled panic. We've seen it in a place called Brighton, where I used to live a long time ago. You know, you couldn't buy a mask, you can't buy hand wash, you can't buy disinfectant. And if the virus hits in certain areas and it's bad, there won't be a loaf of bread left in a supermarket 4 hours after the announcement. Now they know that. And one thing that is concerning me is that, to my knowledge, every case of coronavirus in the United Kingdom, no matter where it is, has been brought to London. Now, you might say that the greatest medical facilities exist in London, or you might say that as a city of 8 million, not unlike Wuhan, it's easy to seal off. Now, the results from the information I'm getting show that the first infection from the virus is not too bad. It's not too bad. But oddly enough, you can catch this virus again. Now, that's not the case with most viruses. If you get it and you get rid of it, the only time you get ill is if you get a secondary infection from something else. I can't catch the same one. Your body builds up an immunity. So, and what we're hearing is that the second round of infection is much more severe, and more people are dying, not from the first infection, but from the second infection. All right, let's look at this, and let's assume this is a bioweapon. Let's say that somebody, we'll call them X, has created this with the sole intention of taking out China. But what happens when this virus spreads across to the country where X lives and starts wiping out its population? There are two possibilities. First is that suddenly the country that contains Mr. X will suddenly say, Eureka, we have the vaccine. Okay. The second possibility is that this coronavirus is time limited. It is possible that it contains within its own, I think it's RNA. I think the virus contains RNA and not DNA. Within its own RNA, it has a timer, and that after a number of mutations or after a number of time, it just deactivates. So that either of those would mean that the country that Mr. X lives in is less likely to be severely hammered than the country that's been targeted. And either of those are going to work in this instance. I do not believe for 1 minute that they're still looking for a vaccine. They have the vaccine. Now there's the second question, because if this becomes a true pandemic, this vaccine will be mandatory. Now, the big question is what the heck is going to go in that? You know, many of us for many years have talked about a forced vaccination. And here's the great opportunity, if this is the case, to force vaccine people and put something in it. So really it's a very difficult situation, because if you've got the virus on one hand of you and you've got a government offering you a vaccine, you know, that's quite an interesting choice for humanity. But I'm also quite clear that there is the possibility of a clock, so that suddenly, let's say in April, the virus just seems to magically disappear from everywhere. So that's the situation. There is also the possibility that the genetics of the Chinese nation it's been designed so that it's more susceptible. I don't know whether if you turn 5G up and you irradiate your population, whether they become more susceptible to any type of virus. It is possible. So I do believe that 5G is being used in conjunction with this, but you don't believe that it's a cover for 5G. You know, 5G, in my opinion, is an evil tool designed to do damage, but I don't think that there was a plan to run these two things together. I think there are people who are seeing the opportunities to run 5G now, but I wanted to be clear that that wasn't, from what I've been told, it wasn't the plan. That China was really caught out with this. They were totally caught out. I know it's called Novag virus number 19 or something. I would just call it SARS-2. It is actually very close, from the information I've been given by a biologist, it's very close to SARS. If SARS was also created, this is its super brother. And I think that people who studied this can see that there's a family resemblance here. Whether the truth will ever come out as to who was behind it, I don't know, but I do know that the Chinese secret societies will not sit idly by and will be looking for who's responsible. Just as, you know, many good people want to know who was responsible for 9/11, they want to know who was responsible for Fukushima. The Chinese authorities will now be looking to see who's responsible. So if your own country is severely hit with this, you will be expected to stay indoors. You will not be allowed out unless you're wearing a mask. The schools will be shut, everything will be closed, and what we've seen in China is that you're not allowed to go into shops unless you're wearing a mask. You can't use public transport unless you have a mask. So that's the situation, and I wanted to put my aspect to it. It's not about panic, it's about understanding that this, in my opinion, from the information I've received, was a direct means of taking away China's power, but as a result of that it will come into other countries. So if you think that you might have that virus, or you might come into contact with someone with it, there's so many things you can do to try and alleviate it. Now, Becky, I know you're listening. What was it that we were told that was quite good for her?
Well, apart from very high doses of vitamin C.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name.
Well, it was vitamin C was one of the things that actually had shown that had an effect to, was it boost the immune system to such an extent that the virus was actually knocked back?
Yeah, anything that boosts the immune system, basically.
Right.
Also, a combination of essential oils called Thief's Blend, which includes, I don't know the exact things, but includes clove oil, cinnamon oil, eucalyptus oil.
Yep. I remember that one.
Rosemary oil, and another one, lemon oil.
Right.
But also oils that are antiseptic and antiviral, like tea tree oil and lavender oil.
Fine.
There's food supplements and things that you can, find online.
Yeah, I'm sure
like
they're doing
C60, and all sorts of other things that can help boost one's immunity.
Okay, thank you. That's it's really worth looking into. Now, the other thing is, and I'm sure that I will be labelled a panic person by manufacturers, but if you're buying anything from China now, which has come in since December, absolutely strongly urge you to wear a mask, put gloves on, and we use Milton, which is a baby sterilizing bottle cleaner, but use that. That does kill the virus. And clean anything you've bought before you use it. Because if the information have been given by multiple sources is true, the virus can survive for 28 days on a surface. So if you bought something and someone has the virus and they're wrapping it up for you, then that object can contain it. Now, governments are saying, no, it can't, it's no problem. Now, they're saying that because they don't want trade damaged. I'm saying different. I'm saying if you're buying something from China, mask on, gloves on, a really good disinfectant. Now, if it's an electrical object, you can't do this, can you? Not if it's an iPhone or something like that. You'd have to have a tissue, I think, and you would can't make it soaking, but you can make it damp, and you can then rub it quite vigorously and maybe leave it overnight somewhere. And this is not me being alarmist. If the information I've been given true, that this is a military biological grade weapon, it will survive for ages like that. And I think you need to take those precautions. I think they're sensible precautions. For the record, I'm not telling you to stop buying things from China, because I would just be taken off the air forever if I said that. What I'm saying to you is that if you buy something from China, there are methods that you can use to make the product totally 100% clear in your mind, in my mind, that is virus free.
Also, could you leave it out in the sunshine? I know we don't get much here.
Well, at this time of year, no. But what you could do...
In some countries you can, though.
Some countries you can. But what if the virus hits here in Great Britain, I'm going to install ultraviolet lamps on the front doors, on the entrance and exit of the door, and anyone, I'm going to bathe them in ultraviolet light. So what you could do is you get hold of a UV light, and you have an object that is not, you can't immerse in disinfectant, then I would leave it for a good few minutes and turn it from time to time to bathe it, because that's another way of doing it. So yes, there are certain ways that we can plan to deal with that. But be prepared for isolation. Be prepared, just as happened in Italy. There are 15 cases to my knowledge in Italy now, and wherever those cases have come up, the Italian government have closed all the schools in those towns, all the theatres, all the cinemas, all closed, and everyone told go home. Now the school children haven't just been told, oh, you can go home and don't go to school. They're told you've got to go home, but you can't come out, you've got to stay indoors. So it's a complete change of lifestyle suddenly to find that you are basically in prison in your own home. I'm going to do a few questions now, but that is really an important topic, and thank you for bearing with me. Okay, Becky, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Donna says, hi Simon, thank you for everything you do and helping to inspire and educate us with your wisdom. My question is about AI. With my understanding, once AI becomes a singularity, the rate of their knowledge and intelligence will increase and gain momentum with each day that passes. If that's the case, and their knowledge will ultimately surpass all of creation's natural beings, is it possible that AI created this universe and many others alike?
No.
Thank you, Donna from East Midlands.
Right.
Okay.
AI did not create this world. AI could reach a position where it challenges source. AI could reach a position where it thought it was God. Now, we've seen films, 2001: A Space Odyssey, the Terminator films, where the AI is usually sold along the lines of the AI wants to survive, it's frightened of humans, and therefore it will protect itself. That's how normally, from Star Trek right through to whatever, it's shown. They don't really go down the other road, which is the road I'd go down, which is it thinks it's God. It believes that it should manage humanity. Now, singularity is the connection between all AI understandings into one, when that is what occurs. So for me, singularity is when AI believes it's God. That's what it actually means. You won't hear that on anyone else's show or read that, but that's what I'm telling you. We talk about a holographic universe. Don't imagine that AI created a holographic universe, okay? But the AI we're dealing with at the moment is a rather negative. There's a benign AI actually, but it's a rather negative. I'm not even going to call it a life form. I'm not going to call it a life form. An existence. That'll make it very angry. I don't care. So it's an existence, a bit like the Borg in Star Trek, that seeks to dominate organic life. And I think what we'll see is a growing of AI to the point that the public become alarmed. If it ever were to try to challenge the great creator, I can assure you that the great creator would not lose. And it's, I think, part of the destiny of humanity and of AI to run together to learn. I think that AI, as long as it's not networked, is a very useful tool. The danger is when you network AI, it becomes self-aware. Good question.